So good to see all of you this morning. We're getting close to Pesach. Pesach is the festival of freedom. So we're going to discuss today the idea of freedom in a sense that someone writes a contract. And in a contract, it is a statement that things can, the interest is a stable interest, but it's all depend upon the process of payment. While someone paid, the borrower paid some of the amount, and the question is, can they tear the original contract and write a new one if the lender and the borrower somehow wants to term and conditions of the original contract? And you see soon the connection to the general subject, which is the Ketubah, meaning we discussing in this tractate, zooming in the idea of agreement between husband and wife, soon to be husband and wife. And the idea is that sometimes there are terms and conditions that have an addition stipulation, meaning the Torah, as we said in the past, gives us a very general framework of commitment between husband and wife. Basically, he commits himself to three items, namely to take care, to protect her, to shelter her, to commit himself to relation with her, and part of all of those commitments is also expenses involved with a health issue, burial issue, etc. As we said yesterday and day before yesterday, sometimes there is an additional commitment that he made, which is something that he wished to do it in addition to a framework. Now, the rabbis came in and put it in number, which is the 100 for someone who's already a widow or divorcee. Someone is a first marriage is a 200. In those days, the currency was zuz. But the framework is the same. The language of the Ketubah, the marriage agreement, is in Aramaic, and we went about a half, almost line by line, of the language in that marriage agreement. Now, the question we're going to ask is, as far as making the wedding itself, can that has to be during the day or not? We learned that as far as the divorce agreement, it has to be during the day in general. There are those who dispute it, but in general it has to be during the day. The court session is only allowed to do during the day. The question is, can we do the chuppah, the marriage, during the day or not? Another subject is the idea that the husband makes some deal, sometimes clandestinely, sometimes not, but make, let's say in a regular case, make a deal with his soon-to-be wife, that the framework of the Ketubah, as far as the numbers and the commitment, is different than the way that the rabbis structure. Is that acceptable or not? Especially when it's come to the number involved with Ketubah. It can be in a case of poverty, it can be in a case of all kind of other consequences. So we are on page 56, 4 lines from the top of the page. כתיב רב חנינא קרא קמא דרבי ינאי וכאמר הלכה כרבי אלעזר בן עזריה. We have rabbis, for sure it's hard for us to imagine how great they are, but amen. But they are luminaries and they are great erudite people. They have tremendous knowledge. But as in a way, if we try to compare the modern world, we have people with specialties. So you can be an MD, but you have a you specialize in certain way. You can be an attorney and you have a specialty in certain way. Lehavdil, no comparison, just to get the mindset, because who we are to talk about these giant sages. It was a rabbi by the name of Rav Chanina that he knows everything in the Torah, not only by heart, but know all the nuances in the Torah, like walking computer. And he was sitting before Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai had the discussion yesterday we explained about halacha, meaning practical law, which is in a way different specialties. And we explained yesterday that Rashi tells us that when you use the term Rabbeinu, it's applied to Rav. And Tosfot said it cannot be Rav, it has to be the great Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the not really author but more collector and author of the Mishnah. So here he said, he hold halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. He hold halacha follow him. What is the halacha? The halacha is, we said that if we have a case of engagement and a man commit himself in addition to a regular essence of Ketubah, as we said, for a widow is 100, for a first marriage virgin is 200, and he made an additional sum of money commitment, it's called Tosefet Ketubah. So if something happened at the period between the engagement and the wedding, according to Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, he is not committing himself to the addition, because that addition have the assumption that we're going further for the actual marriage, and that didn't take place at this point because, for example, a passing of the person. So he said, "Amar lei puk kra ekar levara." So he said to him, in a sense, stick to your field. Your field is Torah, Mikra. You are now sticking in a way yourself, your nose, whatever, to something that it's the Korban Ha'edah said, name of the Yerushalmi, that this is more halachic discussion, that it's not your specialty. Why? Ein halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. We do not follow him. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Rav Dimi mishum Rabbeinu halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. You see here a disputation if we follow a ruling of Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, which is, again, if we follow by the time of the marriage only, or we follow as far as the additional payment for the Ketubah from the time of the first commitment, which was at the time of the betrothed, the engagement. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah, Rav Nachman lidei Amar en halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. You see, unaharde mishmei Rav Nachman Amar halacha ke Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. You see how heavy it is. ואף על גב דלת רב נחמן ואמר כל דנאיה דדנין כרבי אלעזר בן עזריה אחא ואחא תהיה ואפילו אחא הלכה כרבי אלעזר בן עזריה. So the bottom line is והלכה למעשה כרבי אלעזר בן עזריה. So the idea is the practical halacha, usually the Talmud don't use this language, but it's after it's all said and done, a woman that the husband is no longer among the living. If it was after the wedding, obviously she received both the Ketubah and the Tosefet and the addition. But if it happens before they got married, she does receive the essence of Ketubah, but she will not receive the Tosefet, which is the rule of Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. And after all these long argument and curse and everything, it turns that they follow Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah. Now, here is the next question. Ba'i Ravin. נכנסה לחופה ולא נבעלה. Here we have a very painful subject, which is, if you read in the book of Ruth, Boaz, according to the Midrash, does have the privilege to have relation with Ruth, even it was a huge distance in age, but then he passed. Here it's much severer case, which is they have Kiddushin, they have the Ketubah, they have the Tosefet, they have the Nisuim, they have the Chuppah, everything went done lovely. However, right after they dance, God forbid, he get a heart attack and he passed. Okay, so it means it was not bi'ah, it was not a physical relation between him and her. The question we have here, does he need to pay that we collect the Tosefet, the additional sum of the Ketubah, or not? The big question is, it's called Chibat Chuppah or Chibat Bi'ah, meaning when the man, we're using our lucid language, was very high at the moment of the engagement, and he, in addition to a regular structure of rabbinic commitment, he made an extraordinary commitment at the time of the engagement. What exactly he have in his mind? We called it yesterday umdana. We have an assumption what the man has in his mind. He has in his mind that he wanted to have a physical relation with her, which it didn't happen, or he just want to be with her under the chuppah and call them as a pair, as a couple. What exactly he have in his mind at the time that he commit himself to give her Lamborghini, in addition to the regular Ketubah, right? Mm-hmm. So, do we really go ahead and give her the extra sum of money or not? Mahu, chibat chuppah kona or chibat bi'ah kona? What exactly you have in his mind? We go by the affection of the wedding, of the affection of the intercourse. What exactly? Because to us, we are talking about kinyanim, the right of acquisition, and the question we ask when it's come to a right of acquisition, what exactly he had in his mind. So we said, Tashma, the Tana Rav Yosef. You remember what Rabbi Lazar ben Azariah said? He said that engagee arusa, not collecting the tosefet, the addition. Because, as we said, it wasn't a kirva, it wasn't any attachment to between the two. And he said, Shelo katav la ela al chibat laila harishon. The reason that he wrote it for her, it's because he was looking forward for the first night to be together in a manner of physical relation the first night. If you tell me that the only idea is the wedding effect of marriage, that is why the affection characteristic of Hainu Damar Laila Rishon. Why? Because the first night in the regular way, which Shitan Kubeset explained, that's the night that, especially if it's a first marriage, it's a lot of excitement. If you tell me that the idea of the intercourse is the the relation they have between them, it's not only at the first night, it's a normal relation between a husband and wife, that the physical relation continue on. So it means this type of intercourse is coming along all the time. The moment they have the chuppah, you tell me that she is acquired zachta betosefet ketubah, she received also the additional sum of money in addition to ketubah. Ve'elamai, so what do you prove from this? Chuppah, you mean to say that the wedding effect that take the acquisition, chuppah balayla ita bimama leita. In general, we hold that the chuppah, right? We're waiting for the shkia. Soon.
Yes.
The man is travel from Savannah, right?
Yes.
Going to have a chuppah at night and not in the day. The truth is, we do have chuppah during the day. So now, the word rishon, it can be differently. The idea is that from the word laila, from the word night, it means the effect of the intercourse, not the effect of the chuppah, because we just learned that it's in a way preferable, advisable to do it at night, but there are circumstances that we do the chuppah during the day. Uletamech, and according to the idea that it's a night, and again, all this argument, it's about the additional sum, it's about the Lamborghini. That's the argument, right? So, bi'a balayla ita, I don't know if everyone wanted. I'm not crazy about Lamborghini. They will tell you, right? It's Italian car, and it's too fancy and too many problems. You know, even BMW Z8, it's not so attractive anymore.
Very expensive to maintain.
Yeah, very expensive to maintain. I'll live in peace with my Ultima.
There you go.
They have 348 horsepower, and that's plenty. Anyway, ולטעמך, ביאה בלילה איתה, ביממה לאיתה. They have relation only at night and not on day, which is again, here we enter the code, ואמר רבה, אם היה בבית אפל מותר. Usually, we say that the relation should be in a modest way. However, a person can להאפיל בטליתו, which means if there is a need, they can have the relation. We study it both in Shabbat 86 and Nida 17, that if they are in a dark place even during the day, they can have the relation. So it's not necessarily at night. Halokashia, orach ar'a kamash melan debi'a balayla. We go by the general term of the people, and the people, in a very general way, they are basically go by the night. Now, ela chupa kashya. So why we have the word chupa night? We have chupa also during the day. Chupa na melokashya. Kevan the stam chupa lebi'a kaima. The general idea of chupa canopy, to have that is in order to cohibit orach ara kamash belan de belayla. So we learn from that the ordinary mode of behavior, that intercourse generally takes place at night. So you see, as a result, this Braita, we cannot use the Braita as a proof for either one of these possibility. So Rabbi Akiva Iger, he said the name of Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, that he holds that the chuppah is the opposite. The chuppah is specifically during the day. He said, we learn makish havaya li'tzi'ah, the same way as a get is the bill of divorce. You have to do during the day, the same way he hold that the matter of kiddushin has to be during the day. So again, Rabbi Akiva Iger bring this Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi, this notion.
Is the writing or the delivery of the get has to be during the day?
What do you mean?
The writing of the get or the delivery of the get has to be during the day?
The idea is everything should be during the day.
Both should be during the day.
But at least the writing
should be.
Yes, during the day. Preferably, advisably, the Elokim Nitzav Ba'adat Kel, we learn in general that the session of court has to be in a day.
Has to be
For example, if it's a dinei nefashot, if it's an execution or any manner like that, they cannot appeal the judgment by any means at night. The session has to be during the day.
Right.
So we said the same way as the exit, havaya li'tzi'ah, exit, the divorce has to be at the day. Rabbi Eliyahu Mizrahi said that also the wedding has to be the day. There are those who dispute that and said that yes, it is true that get chovat hayom, that we do the divorce during the day, but the Noda B'Yehuda hold that in some cases it can be at night, and it's a how do you say it? It's not advisable, it's not wishable, but there are some. The Khatam Sofer said that the Bed Din has to be 3, and 3 has to be during the day. And the general, the concept is in here, the bottom line, the both, Noda B'Yehuda, Khatam Sofer, everyone said that we don't change Minhagei Israel. That's the minhag we have, so we keep it. You know, the 4th parak in Psachim, the first Mishna, dealing with minhagim, diverse customs, and we follow the customs that established from our ancestors as the established tradition. So the Gemara have a quandary. By Rav Ashe, Nichnesa lachupa upersa nida ma'u. You tell me that the whole goal is to cohabited. So what do you do if they got married and boom, she get her period? So he get her period, and therefore he cannot cohabited with her, but he passed away. So what do you do now with additional sum? Again, we go back to Lamborghini, that she gets the Lamborghini or not, right? So they said, אם תמצא לומר, if you tell me חיבת חופה קונה, חופה דחזיה לביאה, אבל חופה דלא חזיה לביאה. So you tell me that since she have a period, that the whole goal was to have relations, or not, or just to be under the chuppah, right? So לא, או דילמה לא שנה. So teiku, the rabbis did not solve that. You know, this is one of the Talmudic places that they have no solution. You see everyone laughing, but that's the big question here is, what does that mean? Ma ze chuppah? What exactly the meaning of the concept of chuppah? There are those who say that that's the kinyan isha, that that's the acquisition. The Rambam hold that bi'akona, that only the intercourse, that's the manner of acquisition. So if you have a situation like that, a chupat nida, the big question is how the Rambam said that bi'akona. So the answer, they said, it's the Rosh explained this Rambam, and he said that what the Rambam meant is she entered the domain of the chuppah, which means originally the goal was to have an intercourse, and then in a way unexpectedly she gets her period.
But we're only talking about the Tosefah, right? I mean the Ketubah, there's no question. No question.
No,
yeah.
Only Tosefah.
Yeah.
So therefore, that's what the Rambam said, that she was hayta re'uya lebi'ah, she was befitting, but the situation unexpectedly changed, and that's what it meant. Anyway, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, רוצה כותב לבתולה. Now, the question is, Reuven, for example, lend money, let's say $1,000 to Shimon, and Shimon returned $200. Now, they want to tear that contract and write a new one that he owes him $800. So, is that okay or not? So, in general, if they set up an agreement that, for example, for financial reasons, he knew that for a virgin he needs to commit himself for 200. She writes that she received 100, even she's not. He writes 200, and in reality, it's 100. So the Gemara challenge that it says, "V'savar Rabbi Yehuda dekotvim shover." Is that okay to write a new receive, like a new contract, even the borrower paid only part of the loan? Ve'atnan, we learn in Tractate Bava Batra in Mishna, page 170b. Mi shepara miktzat chovo, if someone paid, but he paid only part of his loan, and the fear is, the guy said, you know what, I realized that this guy, lender, he is an unscrupulous guy, and he can play with games, and he did not write anything that I paid him the 200, and he can come tomorrow and sue me, and he wants it the 1,000, even I already gave him 200. So he wants to tear the contract, and he wants to have a new one, right? For example, Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yachlif. If they come before the court, the lender needs to tear that original agreement, and he needs to write the money that left over, but you do not leave by the lender the original contract. Why? Because, for example, if that part will be lost, or the mice eat it, or whatever it is, right? And the borrower cannot prove that he paid some of the loan, Rabbi Yossi Omer, yichtov shover, yichtov lo shover. So Rashi said that, let's face it, when the lender gives the money, he has a lien against the property of the borrower. So that's basically, this is the part that he withholds, and that's the reason he have this fear. Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, כששוברתה מתוכה, which means the witness right, here we compare it to our Ketubah, the witness is right within the framework of the Ketubah, that the wife admitted at the front of them that she received part of the Ketubah. which means you do not have a separate shovar. They just written at the top that she received part of that. In that case, good morning. In that case, we have here, oh look, he's here. Jaden, good to see you. Anyway, so she received some of them. Let's face it, we're not in practical halachot, but it can happen that during the life of marriage, that he wants to give some, for all kind of reasons, to her. הבעיה אמר אפילו טבע בשן שוברתה מתוכה בישלמה הטעם דילמה ודאי בישו אדם ודאי פרי דילמה מירקס תברתה ומה פיקלה לשטרה. So maybe we want to avoid any manner of stealing or manner of try to circumvent the system or the fear that the husband, if it's a vengeance between the two, you know, it's nothing worse than the feud in the family. So she wants basically to collect more than he entitled, and he ends up paying double, right? So we want to avoid it. So והדר גבי זימנה אחרינה. Hacha vadaya hivla. He paid, the husband paid part of the Ketubah. Milta be'alma ida amrele. Inatre natre. Vilon tatre iwa de afsida nafshei. So, because he did not pay yet anything, the husband. Bishlama abaye lo amar ki Rabbi Yirmiyah. Lo ktani shovarta mitocha. Which means that's the way the manner we usually do. Ela Rabbi Yirmiyah maitama lo amar ki Abaye. Gzera shovar de achad o shovar de alma. So Tosfot explained to us that if you don't write this type of receipt, the lender will lose part of the lien. So therefore, when you have the date, in a sense, the borrower is under tremendous pressure because he wants to finish that loan. He's have a great fear. So that's the reason that you write this receipt. Maybe the guy will lose some of that. Tama, now we're dealing with someone who put a condition of something that it's already written in the Torah, so that condition is no longer effect. Versus when it's come to monetary issue, so that condition will not be annulled. Tama dechatvale. The reason is why her forgiveness, part of the money that he owns her at the time of the contract, when they reach the point of marriage, it's because, and she wrote that she received some, it's because that she put it in writing. The Ritva explained to us that you write it not as a part of stipulation, but basically he commit himself to 200 and she received 100. That's the manner of the writing. She put it in writing. Aval alpe, if she just said it verbally, not in writing, lo, it's not in effect. Amai, davar shebamamonu, this is a manner of monetary issue. ושמין לרבי יהודה דאמר דבר שבממון תנאו קיים. רבי יהודה hold that something involved with a monetary issue, that condition will not be annulled. So the reason why you need to write. So in a practical halacha, if you have a setup in advance between the couple, that, for example, let's trace a situation. She said, like my daughter, she said originally to her husband, I want you to sit and study, I'll take care of the life expenses. She is a registered nurse, she wants him to sit and study. So he said to her, all right, so you don't expect me to support you, right? So the truth is, that deal is not in effect. Why? Because biblically speaking, the moment he got married, he commit himself to support her. That's part of the 3 commitments we discussed earlier. So that condition, it cannot override the Torah condition for marriage. The Tanya, haomer laisha הרי את מקודשת לי. If someone said to a woman, you betrothed to me, על מנת שאין לי עליי שאר כסות ועונה. I do not, in the condition that we got married, but you do not expect from me any of the 3 biblical commitments, which is the livelihood, the clothing, and the marital relation. So basically, that condition, if it's no marital relation, so it's no kiddushin. So Rabbeinu Tam brought the Gemara in Gittin. The Gemara in Gittin said that if someone give a get, the bill of divorce to his wife, and he said, על מנת שתעלי לרקיע. You take this get in order for you to go to heaven. So the idea is, he doesn't meant that she will go to heaven, and the get is an effective get, because we know that he doesn't mean it. It's not, so it's like you make a stipulation on money, and then you tearing the bill to pieces. So in a condition that tomorrow will be hot. So it's the money is already tears, there's no value. So that's the Rabbeinu Tam explained, that the moment he betrothed her, that condition already take place. And then the Kiddushim Tofsim, the betrothed is in effect, even that condition is not in effect. Because as we said, matne al mash ketuv b'Torah, if someone put a condition, something that's already written in the Torah, harezo mekudeshet utnao batol. She basically betrothed to him, and his condition is no longer in effect. That's what the Torah said in the book of Exodus chapter 21 verse 10. דברי רב מאיר, רבי יהודה אומר, בדבר שבממון תנאו קיים. So he said you have to differentiate between physical relation, that the husband is obligated to that, he cannot avoid that, versus money, that it is in effect. So here, so how good is it if she let go part of the Ketubah commitment verbally, because Ketubah, the marriage agreement, is a monetary matter. Kassavar Rabbi Yehuda Ketubah de Rabbanan. Rabbi Yehuda holds that the marriage contract is rabbinic law, and therefore v'chachamim asu chizuk lidvarem utar midvrei Torah. So the rabbis, the sages, reinforce their pronouncements with greater force than the Torah law. So therefore, if the wife waives part of the main sum of the marriage contract, Rabbi Yehuda holds that her declaration has no force unless it is written down. However, a Torah obligation such as food and clothing does not require their enforcement, and consequently, the wife may waive it with verbal stipulation. So they said, Harei peirot de Rabbanan, velo avdu leho Rabbanan chizuk. You see here, the Gemara challenged this, and they said the husband entitled to produce of his wife's property is nichsei milog, is the rabbinic decree, which means she bringing a valuable property to the marriage, that she have it from the previous time, for example, from her father's house, and he entitled to the produce that come out of that property. So they said, and nevertheless, ve'al velo avdu Rabbanan chizuk ditnan. We learn page 83, רבי יהודה אומר, לעולם אוכל פרא פירות, עד שיכתוב לדין ודברים אין לי בנכסיו ופירותיהם ופירות פירותיהם עד עולם. So he said, as long as, unless he explicitly write to her that did not have the claim to your property, its produce or the produce of the produce forever, and he said, 56b, וקיימלן מאי כותב אומר. So we maintain that what is the meaning of rights? Said, so it means says. So in order to relinquish one's claim to produce of the produce of his wife's property, he does not necessarily need to write it in a document. It is sufficient to say it verbally in front of witnesses. So it seems that Rabbi Yehuda holds that verbal stipulation is sufficient for a monetary matter of rabbinic law. So the Gemara said, Amar Abaye, lakol yesh ketubah velo lakol yesh perot. Everyone, all the women has the marriage contract, but not have the produce. So therefore, milta deshchicha avdu Rabbanan chizuk, milta deshchicha lo avdu chizuk. You have to differentiate between Ketubah, that this is something that it's the rabbis came in and make it very clear, very strong. So therefore, it's not in effect, versus something that it's not so common. For example, the produce of that property, that it's relatively rare, so therefore it's in effect. So nichsei milog is lo shchiach, so therefore it's effect. So there's a story about the Rav Karelis, the Chazon Ish, that someone came and said, this is only rabbinic. So he said to him, we're not a Seducit, we're not Sedokim. So there is some Rishonim that said that that's the idea of Lot Asur. The sages put the word much in the Torah because of that. Varei Chamarim, we have here a people that in those days, the donkey drivers, So they bringing from a cheap places to the market in order to sell it. The shchiche, that's common. ולא עבדו לה רבנן חיזוק דתנן. This is Tractate, Yomי, chapter 4. החמרים שנכנסו לעיר ואמר אחד מהם שלי חדש ושל חברי ישן. You know, they're standing in the market. Have you ever been in a shuk? So one said, my produce is much better than the other guys. But the other guys is old, my new, etc. שלי אינו מתוקן ושל חברי מתוקן, אין נאמנים. I took a tithe which is required in Eretz Israel, he doesn't do it, etc. They just badmouth each other, right? So Tanakama said that they are not trustworthy. Rabbi Dr. Omer nemanim. Rabbi Dr. said, yes, they are deemed credible. So this indicates that Rabbi Dr. holds that the verbal stipulation is sufficient for a common monetary matter of rabbinic law. Amar Abaye, וידאי לדבריהם עבדו רבנן חיזוק, ספק לדבריהם לא עבדו רבנן חיזוק. We have to differentiate between דמאי, a produce that did not take a tithe, versus another option. We're running out of time. Rava אמר בדמאי הקלו. Right? So he said, but come to דמאי, it's not clear, so we are more lenient. The fear is that they make all kind of clandestine deal between the two. So therefore, he put it on the other guy's name, etc. It's a story about Rabbi prenuptial. He said that someone come and said, Rabbi, I want a tikkun. I want you to guide me to the right path. But he didn't say it's for myself, he said it's for someone else. But he knew that it's him. So he said, why are you asking someone else if I think that it's something that you need to. Anyway, Rabbi Meir Omer kol hapochet. So we said in the Mishnah that if someone reduce the amount that this framework of the rabbis, we considering as a illicit relation between the two. Kol hapochet, afilu betna'a, even in the stipulation. Why? Because she fears that she will not receive the entire Ketubah, and it's not the whole idea of Ketubah that it will not be easy for him to divorce her. So therefore the relation is considering zenut. Alma kasavart nao batel veitla, וכיוון דאמר לתלך אל המנה לא שם חדתה, ואבל הביתו בלעד זנות. Even למעשה in practical, it's you need to pay 200 zuz. והשמינון לרב מאיר דאמר כל המתנה מה שכתוב בתורה תנאו בטל, בדרבנן תנאו קיים. So we have to differentiate between someone who said something that it's a manner of rabbinic versus kasvar mer ketubah deoraita. Meir holds that marriage contract is required by Torah law. So as a result, if one made stipulation to reduce the amount of the marriage contract, this is stipulation counter to that which is written in the Torah, and it's void. תניא רב מאיר אומר, כל הפוחת לבתולה מ-200 ולאלמנה ממנה, הרי זו בעילת זנות. So here is the issue that the person make a deal with his wife that he will give her less than the amount that the sages instituted. For example, if it's a first marriage and the commitment is for 200, in those days it was a currency named zuz. So if he made an agreement with her that he will pay her less than what the rabbis instituted, so general statement, they said that that's the relationship between them, it's illicit. What does that mean? The rabbis basically instituted a structure of marriage. Since it's a structure of marriage, at Ketubah, and the condition of the Ketubah, if a person reduces the amount that the rabbis put as a framework, therefore is just some types of illicit intercourse in the rabbi's statement, because the agreement involved with something that is not in the framework of the rabbis. Rabbi Yossi Omer Rashai. Rabbi Yossi said it's okay to do it if she agreed to give less money than he should. Even in that condition, Shita Mekubetzet explains, even that condition was only verbally, meaning she did not sign on a piece of paper for that. Rabbi Yehuda אומר, רצה כותב לי בתולה שטר של 200, והיא כותבת לו, התקיבלתי ממך מנה. If he wished to, if it's a first marriage, and he commit himself to 200, in those days was the currency of zuz. So just let's talk dollars, it will be easy for us. Let's say the commitment is $200. She give him a receipt for $100 even she never received the money, she just write it for him. As we explained earlier, it can happen because of the financial situation and more. So she said, I forgive a portion of that, and she signed it on the form of receipt. So, ולאלמנה מנה והיא כותבת לו התקבלת ממך 50 זוז, or if it's a widow, and by the structure of the rabbis is 100, and she writes for him, I receive from you 50, even she's not, which means both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi agree upon that as long as she consent to that, it is acceptable. The only difference between them is Rabbi Yossi hold that can do it verbally, meaning she can agree upon verbally and it's effective by Jewish law. Rabbi Yehuda said no. The sages instituted their words much stronger than Torah words, and since they are the people who put the institution of the marriage agreement in writing, so this type of forgiveness of part of the money that he commit himself toward her is in effect only if she wrote in a separate receipt that she received some of the money that he commit himself in the Ketubah. If it's not in that fashion, it's not valid. So the Gemara asks a question. V'savar Rabbi Yossi Rashai? You mean to say that Rabbi Yossi hold that verbal consent is sufficient, meaning the husband can make agreement with his wife whatever they wish to, even it's outside the framework of our sages? Vera minhi, we have an issue with that. אין עושים כתובת אישה מטלטלים מפני תיקון העולם. Here is a problem that can go in much more direction. Let's say a husband writes an agreement with his wife over the Ketubah, and it happens sometimes it's lost, it's stolen, sometimes the Ketubah it's expensive, especially the addition to the Ketubah, which can be a subjugation of a property, etc. So the Rabbi Yossi actual hold that they said collection of a woman's marriage contract may be made dependent upon movable property, and it's a rabbinic decree that they do that in order to betterment the world. So the idea is, it may be that movable object will be lost, and she will lose either part or a lot of money. Again, in our modern days, we can say, for example, stocks or bond or other items that you have the principal and you have the interest. And since the interest change, it can turn that she will lose. So Rabbi Yossi said, since the price can change, אמר רבי יוסי, וכי מה תיקון העולם יש בזה. She anyway can lose some of the money. So in that sense, Rabbi Yossi contradicted himself. והלא הם קצובים ופוחתים. Meaning that those movable object is not a set-up price. Sometimes they go high, sometimes they go low. So they said, ותנא קמא נמי אין עושים כאמר, אלא עליו הכי כאמר. במה דברים אומרים שלא קיבל עליו אחריות, אבל קיבל עליו אחריות עושים. Here you have to differentiate between if the husband took a guarantee, which means he guarantee saying that if something happened, this is a guarantee, this is the substitute guarantee for something. So therefore, it can be an exchange. Let's trace a situation we discussed yesterday of aputiki, which means in the part of the agreement, we will do another one for you. Don't worry.
Thank you, Rabbi.
So part of the agreement is if you have a property that the husband commit himself to that property. You remember the Lamborghini? That's a good example. Again, let's make sure that everyone understands it. There is a framework of Ketubah that speaks about first marriage of 200 and marriage as a widow or divorcee is 100. That's the framework of basic Ketubah. but there is a concept that's called tosefet, which is an addition to the Ketubah itself. The tosefet, the man, for example, during the engagement was so high, he commit himself to give her Lamborghini. He commit himself to give her extra amount of money. That it's not part of what the rabbis ask a person to do. So we discussed earlier that if something happened earlier before they totally married, it's a big disputation if she received that. But here we see that when it's come to exercise the right over the Ketubah, because as we explained earlier, sometimes if there's a financial crisis occurred, and she wants to have an access to the Ketubah and use some of that money, especially if that Ketubah is depend upon property that he owns, so the husband can take a responsibility, a guarantee, by dedicating certain other properties for that. Ve'ata Rabbi Yossi lemeimar, and Rabbi Yossi came and teach us, ki kibel alav achrayut, if he take responsibility, if it's stolen or lost. So, אחריות, מה עושים? ולא הם כתובים ופוחתים. How come you say that it's okay? We explained earlier that movable objects can change their values. Sometimes the appraisal go higher, sometimes low. So it means that if she will lose some of the money from the original agreement, so even if the husband take responsibility, it has to be in our modern days language of extra insurance that protected, lost, or stolen, and therefore, otherwise you have an issue of giving or dedicating movable object in order to exercise the right to access that ketubah. Hashta Uma Tam Vedilma Pachatei Chayesh Rabbi Yossi. Over there in that Braita, we have concern, Rabbi Yossi have a concern that maybe that property get less than the value, and she will not receive the amount of ketubah that he committed himself originally. So therefore, Rabbi Yossi said that you cannot dedicate those movable objects. Hacha devadai kapachata lo kol sheken. But here you see a situation that for sure it gets less than amount of the ketubah. So it will definitely be devalued. It is not all the more so clear that he will be concerned. So the Gemara said very beautifully, they said, number one, there is the issue of kiddushin betnai, which means I'm giving you this amount, let's say 100 zuz, in a condition that you receive the ketubah. So again, the question is how much and how serious was that form of agreement? Hachashta, hatam, lo yada tadchil, hacha yad'a v'kama chala. Over there, what happened? She in a way does not know if a marriage contract will be devalued. So there is no reason to suppose that she will waive his obligation to her, which means, in a sense, she's innocent. She doesn't know what's going to. You can say that she's gullible, or she doesn't know how things turn around. But here, if he make it very clear to her before they enter to that agreement, right, that this is what the agreement and this is the amount, etc., etc., so she let go even milchatchila. For example, if he is a poverty-stricken or he cannot marry her with this amount that the rabbi is instituted, etc., etc., so according to Rabbi Yossi, you can go along with that. So there is a responsa from Rabbi Akiva Iger. He lived before he got married in a city called Lisa. It's a city in Poland. And during his wedding ceremony was a lot of rabbis. So it's a famous responsa that those rabbis have a discussion during his wedding. And it's back and forth. The idea is, if you write something has the same value in Judaism as you verbally commit to something or not. A good example is counting the Omer. Counting the Omer, so if you're counting the Omer, you basically, the moment you do that, you already accepting upon yourself the new days. So what happened if you're writing a letter? And at the top of the letter you said, today is 2 days for the Omer. So can you count now the Omer? So Rabbi Akiva Iger said, you can count the Omer. Why? You bring a proof from the scenario of the Sotah. We learn in the book of Bamidbar, book of Numbers, Parashat Naso, about the woman that wasn't faithful to her husband. And in order to bestow peace between husband and wife, the Kohen needs to write on the scroll the name of Hashem. He needs to put the scroll with the water, and then she needs to drink it, and if she come out clean, then the Torah said everything can go on. So the question is, here you see a situation that the Kohen asked her to take an oath that she was faithful to her husband, and now he put in writing the name of God on that scroll before she even take an oath. How come you do so? So here he bring a proof to the counting of the Omer as well, which means as long as you don't as long as you don't hear it in your ears, so it's fine to put it in writing. Now the Minchat Chinuch said that's applied to another avenue. Again, it's just a vignette. The Minchat Chinuch said when you ascribe writing the Sefer Torah, so you need to write the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, in the certain way. Now, what happened rarely, if you remember, the Gemara in Yoma said that it was one scribe that the rabbis were mad at him because he knew how to use all the fingers and to combine it and write together the name of Hashem, Yud and K and Vav and K in one time. And one of the problem is that you not erase anything and you write it properly. And the issue is that Yud and Hey you can erase if you don't do it right. Mm-hmm. So Minchat Chinuch said, basically what happened to the scribe, he said something, and after he said, he put in writing. Right? So the issue is, you have a writing and you have the expressions. So here again, as long as you don't pronounce it by just merely writing it, it's not the completion of the action. So, as we see here, this is subject that we continue on, the idea of the Ketubah, the value of the Ketubah, the decrease of value of Ketubah in the future pages as well.
Boyachem leshuloim alachai yeshuloim malachai